Hey, folks, John Kelly. Welcome back to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. This podcast is being brought to you by On Target Claims, where their motto is on target from setback to settlement. Now, listen, a little background. I've worked with these guys on the job, on the street for over 25 years, man, and they have always done the right thing and have always had my back. Now, in this second chapter, let them have your back. Right? You wouldn't go to court without an attorney. Why would you go up against an insurance company without representation, right? They represent you, the policyholder, when you go up against an insurance company submitting a claim. And I can tell you this, right? From beginning to end, they're going to be with you during the entire process. They're going to properly document that claim with the latest technology. And then when it comes time to getting things fixed, they've got a complete stable of vendors that are certified that are going to get it done right the first time. They also offer a pre-loss planning and policy review. So you know exactly what you're covered for, right? Make sure that you're adequately covered. The time to find out that you're not isn't after that horrific event. Okay? So give my friends a call at On Target Claims, 561-208-1775, or go to their website, ontargetclaims.com. They cover the entire state of Florida, offices in Fort Lauderdale and Tampa, and tell them John sent you. And now, let's get to the episode. Hey, folks, John Kelly. Welcome back to the Law Enforcement Life Coach Sometimes Heroes Need Help podcast. Sitting down with Turk Gallagher, the author of Imposters on the Throne, Warriors in the Shadows, exposing poor leadership tactics during tough times, man. Also, a host and developer of Spinning Our Gears podcast, on the job, just doing some great work, man. I love this space where guys that are still in it see the importance of giving back, and that's what he's doing, man. Because when you're in it, you know, and the important part of taking care of each other is it can never be understated. So, Turk, thank you, brother, for taking the time. I appreciate you being here, man.
Hell yeah, man. It's good to be on the show.
That's awesome, bro. So we started chatting a little bit. Give me a little bit of history on you, brother, just for the listener. And you know, be as specific or not with the agencies as you care to, but
Sure.
just to kind of frame not only like why you're sitting there right now and you know how the idea for the book came about and the podcast, and I just want to get into all that and get all that information out there.
Yeah. So my wife and I met in high school. We were high school sweethearts. We moved away to college and I went to a 2-year where she went to a 4-year. And during that time frame when she was finishing up her college, I got hired on at a sheriff's agency there and got my state certification. That was working inside the jail, though. That's one of the requirements before you can hit the road.
I gotcha.
When she finished up her degree, we were like, man, we want to move closer to home and start a family, closer to our hometowns.
Gotcha.
So started looking around, and ironically enough, even in today's day and age, I found my next agency through the newspaper. And had it not been for her grandma, I probably wouldn't have heard of it in the first place. But I applied there and got hired on.
Man.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
The actual hard print newspaper.
No
It wasn't
kidding,
even
man.
online.
Dude.
So I got hired on there, and it was on the road, so it was a whole brand new experience to me. It wasn't anything like the jail.
Yeah. How long were you in the jail?
I was in the jail for just about 2 years, maybe a little bit over.
Yeah, man.
Just like I said, while she was finishing up her degree, and
Nice.
then as soon as that was done, we were like, let's go.
Yeah.
I spent 10 years at my next agency. I did everything from K9 to SWAT to FTO.
Look, first of all, let me cut you off, brother. When you say K9,
yeah,
the only way you're legitimately allowed to say K9 is if it's an apprehension dog.
It was.
Okay, good. Go, because there's a lot of people wearing the fancy fucking vest and gear and shit, and they're just sniffing dope, bro, or they're finding missing kids and stuff.
Or it's a fucking pet inside the police department.
Yeah, no, man. I mean, they got all the regalia and the lead around the neck, and I just, I'm glad.
No. Full on apprehension and dope dog, and actually
eating, tearing it up.
Yes, sir.
That's what. All right, you are a K9 handler then.
And also the other caveat I would give that you're not a handler until you've taken a real bite from a dog, which I have done.
I got Vector took a little piece of my chest from me. Frank Mayo's dog back in the mid '90s, bro. So yes, I understand the whole concept. Good deal.
Yeah,
So
I had the
continue, man. I just wanted to clear the air first.
no worries, man.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I did those things, a couple other things in that agency.
Yep.
I don't want to say that I felt entitled, but I really felt like I was working that way towards, making promotions and
Sure.
making a change there. And a lot of things kind of happened at one time. A lot of issues were going on there that just didn't sit well with me, but I was still kind of that agency man, that policy man. Like, let's
Right.
just write it out, And a
Isn't that kind
coworker,
of fucked up, bro? Like when you see things going on, our initial reaction isn't to bail. Our initial reaction is to like
save
try
it.
to be part of the solution.
Yes, yeah, and to explain that, I'm not talking like cops out there, planting dope or stealing stuff on the street. I'm talking stuff in the building, interpersonal things where officers were getting run through the mud or not getting taken care of, and when they finally stood up for themselves, they were getting pushed down even further. That's the type of stuff that I'm
Inside
talking
the
about.
four walls, man.
Yeah, that buddy fucker type of thing going on, right?
Yeah, man.
So this stuff was going on. I'm still trying to make change. I'm still trying to be part of the agency and be the solution. And a friend of mine happened to, he might have been a sergeant of mine, turned me on to this podcast called the Roll Call Room Podcast.
Okay.
And I'm listening to it, and he's like, I guarantee you the first episodes, you're going to be just jacked up in your cruiser, Sure enough, I was listening to it. It was like everything was hitting home, everything was relating to me. And when my eyes were kind of finally opened, I realized that it's not an officer problem, and it's not a few bad apples in admin that we just have to wait until they're retired. It's a much bigger problem than that. It's a structural problem that we have to work through.
Right.
So still kind of in limbo, trying to figure out if I'm going to stick around and help out or not. I realized also we have a big problem with mental health, and it's being caused by poor leadership.
Right.
So a coworker of mine and I decided we were going to start this podcast, the Spinning Our Gears podcast. And at first, the whole idea was just strictly, when you got those two squad cars that we call it 25 in, they're butted up to one another.
Yeah, going car to car. Yeah,
that was our whole premises of the podcast, was this is going to be just like going car to car and talking to your buddies and working through bullshit.
nice.
And eventually it led more towards leadership than
Sure.
still mental health and everything, but my eyes just kind of kept getting opened. And eventually one day I came home with another bullshit story to my wife. And granted, at this point, I've got seniority, I've got vacation time built up, I've got, I'm closer to the top end of the pay scale.
Yeah.
And she looks at me and she goes, well, when is so and so hiring? Right. This is the first time she's ever even alluded to the fact
She's
that,
dropped the hint, like, well,
yeah.
maybe you need to bail.
Well, and prior to that, I would come home and joke and say, yeah, hey, this agency's hiring. And she just kind of roll her eyes at me like, yeah, we're not starting all over again. Right.
Right.
So when she finally said that, I was like, okay, so a third party person who's privy to all this stuff realizes that it's bad and it's time to fucking get out.
Wow.
So I found the agency that I'm at now. I went through that whole application process. I've been there for a couple of years. They've been treating me very, very well. Like, I'm already on days as a detective. I've got a bunch of different instructor positions. They have no problem with me being a leader there, whether it be rank or not.
Nice.
So
nice.
I'm in a good place there. But then when it comes to the book, I just felt like I needed to do more. Like, a podcast only gets to so many ears,
Sure.
Obviously I've got a story to tell that you have to be kind of careful with how you tell that.
Sure.
And I was at a training one day, out of county. Family wasn't around. I had nothing else to do. I had my laptop on me, and I just started putting some stuff down. Just started writing some stuff, and I was 3 chapters in within an hour and a half.
Right.
So at that point, it was like, man, we got to finish this thing and see how to publish it.
Nice. Imposters on the throne, warriors in the shadows, exposing poor leadership tactics during tough times. It's funny. So I'm reading the book and I'm going, yep. And so I guess it's disheartening, right? Because wouldn't it be great to say it's isolated? Like,
yeah,
it's only in California do we, are things jacked up and sideways. It's only in big agencies. It's only in small agencies. It's the one universal flaw of this profession, and you can't even say it's generational because listen, I mean, I've got some time on you, right? I
Mm-hmm.
did 30. I'm 57 now, but even back in the early 90s, there were dudes that had absolutely no business
Yeah.
having stripes on their shoulder. They just, and so I think it's gotten worse as time has gone by.
Yeah.
And that whole talk to me about like the blind leading the blind here, you know?
It, so I guess the whole premise is started on that the saying that everyone's heard: tough times create
Yeah,
tough men
right,
create easy times, right? And I'm like, man, looking at, like, you call them the blind,
right,
they had a real easy way of doing things. And when there were a bunch of real street cops on the ground fighting crime, they were worried about their next promotion. They weren't getting the training, they weren't getting the experience. They were stabbing their buddies in the back, and they were kissing a lot of ass, but they weren't getting the real world stuff that you need to be a leader in an agency.
right.
But because they were kissing all that ass and because they were stabbing all those backs, their rise through the ranks was
Yeah,
very,
they
very
weren't they
quickly.
weren't they weren't spending a lot of time in IA
Right.
because of use of force complaints.
They were
And
becoming IA.
yeah, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And so once they took over, once they started to get those leadership positions, really as a manager, they're not leaders, they're managers.
right.
But once they started to get those positions, they realized how inept they were at their job, and they started to get worried about that. So instead of fixing the problem and putting in the hard work that it takes to be a real fucking cop,
Mm,
they started pushing people down or kind of raising that next generation that's going to follow underneath them so that their position is safe and easy.
yeah. That's and you see that play out to a greater or lesser extent in basically every agency that's out there. It may be it may if it's not in the command structure, then it's within the specialized units and
Yeah.
that hierarchy and that
Yeah.
command staff. Um, yeah, it's that crazy dynamic, man, where people get intimidated and threatened instead of utilizing somebody as a resource,
Yeah.
right, to add value to not only their own leadership style or and just come out and go, you know what, man, you've got some skill sets that I could benefit from.
Right.
Um, we dismiss. I worked with a guy who was a command sergeant major in the Marine Corps, spent time in Africa killing terrorists. He comes back, and we're like, hey, Sergeant Major, you want to do some additional like entry training for the troops, like
Yeah.
because we got a
Maybe
new
you know what the hell you're doing.
we got a new squad, and wouldn't that be it would be pretty badass, man, if you could show us some things that goddamn command sergeant major.
Right.
I mean, but guess what? I'm utilizing him as a tool to
Yeah.
better everybody. He's jacked. He's stoked. I've got leadership capital and credit building with him. I mean, it just works, man.
Yeah. The
It just
they
works.
say the best teams are the ones where the leader knows their own weaknesses and they're
Right.
recruiting people that have the strengths where their weaknesses are
Yeah.
to start filling on those holes.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that I always thought it was kind of weird, Turk. You also see these guys and their inability to admit that they're wrong or
Yeah.
that they had made a mistake. It's like one of the foundational things. Like when you were raised, like you admit if you're wrong. Like, hey, I'm wrong. You get in more trouble for not admitting that you were wrong
Right.
or that you made a mistake. Right? I mean, it's just and we got guys doubling down on bad decisions
And
and
I
refusing. Yeah.
I don't know if that's, it might be a two-part thing, right? It might be because they're afraid to admit they're wrong and they're afraid of that competition. I think part of it is the whole like liability thing, right? Like if I admit that I'm wrong or I did something wrong, then we might get sued. Man, we have that chance, going through a door.
Right.
Like lawsuits are going to happen. So stop worrying about the money part of it and just do your job.
Yeah, I think obviously depending on the situation, I mean, if it's something that's not in the public eye, then you know there's no liability component to that decision making process. They just don't have the mechanism in place to have that. I think maybe there's an element of humility that's missing. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say humility and heart is a big part of it. Like, obviously, we're really passionate about this job. This is what we do. It's what we love.
Right.
And it hurts to say that you made a mistake or you did something wrong, but it's the only way that you're going to get stronger. I just don't think that these people really care about getting stronger. They care about the paycheck that they're making and they care about their status.
Yeah, and it's troubling because you write in the book, be the leader that you wish to have managing you. Like, I mean, we're talking about old adages, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
treat people the way you want to be treated.
Yeah.
Be the boss that you would want,
Yeah.
and somehow there's a disconnect that occurred, and you stopped being that guy.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people say they forget where they came from. They forget where they came from. I
Right.
think a lot of the time they never came from that same place. Like I said, I think they were worried about getting
That's an
promoted day
excellent
one.
point, man.
You know
That's
what I
an
mean?
excellent point.
If you're worried about making sergeant your very first day of FTO, and that's all you're concerned about through your entire training is making sergeant one day, then you never went through the same process that a lot of other guys went through,
Right.
or girls, I should say.
Yeah, dude, you can say guys is universal, man. We'll be correcting ourselves all day, man. We can't do that. We can't do that. Everybody gets it, man. Um, and it's funny, like we talked a lot, and so I'm reading your book, and I'm glad we talked prior because I'm going, God damn, it's like I'm taking all these hits emotionally. I'm like,
What a
yeah,
negative Nancy.
yeah, I'm like, this fucking guy, fucking Debbie Downer here, I'm like, and so, like, and you listen, you give the reader, like, hey, a forewarning, like, listen, man, we're going to talk about the problems
Yeah.
in this book, and because the solutions are a lot harder to talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there is a part two coming.
There is a part two coming for sure.
That's
I
awesome,
kind
man.
of looked at that strategically too, because like if you go to any sort of leadership training, they don't
Yeah.
talk about the problem. They give you all of the positive things that you should be doing without taking into account that you're going to have issues you're going to have to face first
Mm,
before you can get to that positive stuff. And
yeah.
I called it the teaching sandwich or whatever, where it's like positive, negative, positive. We got to get
Right.
that negative part out of the way.
Yeah. No, it's good. And dude, you absolutely did that. I'm going through it and I'm thinking, Turk's got a plan. Turk's got a plan because he's not gonna leave me hanging um without any solutions. And so, because ultimately, when we start talking about leadership, I have found myself falling into this trap. I sometimes approach the analysis of it very um not in a multifaceted way, and it is, it's not,
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be awesome if you could say this is the problem, this is the one thing
Right.
that's jacked up about, and so what do you think, what are some of the areas that you think that need to get addressed in book two that are causing the issues that we're having with leadership in our culture?
I think being humble is the number one, right? Understanding that just because you hold a position of leadership doesn't make you better than anyone else, doesn't actually put you on top of anyone else. It just means that you are literally leading them. But as a leader, excuse me, as a leader, your job is to be coaching your next replacement. And if
Yeah.
you can do those two things, if you can be humble and you can actually mentor and coach and teach the people underneath you
Right.
how to be your replacement, and that organization is going to run just fine. It's going to be a lot happier. And the legacy that you're concerned about is going to be much, much better.
Yeah. I agree. Travis Yates.
I
He
do. I was
All
on his
right.
podcast also. Yes, sir.
Yeah, man. So Travis and I got to talking not too long ago, and courageous leadership, and he's all in, man, on calling people out on their bullshit and
Yeah.
trying to be part of the solution. And I said to him, I said, you know what, man? I said, hey, brother, I think we're getting a little too wrapped up in the minutia of all these terms. And we got people going to the FBI, NA, to become better leaders. And if you go there and you're a piece of shit when you go there, you're
Right.
just a polished piece of shit when you leave.
Right.
Right. And so,
With a piece of paper to add to your
yeah,
resume.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Which gives you another layer of insulation in between you and the people that you should be and I say the people you should be caring about. Because
Right.
I really think I like to take a very simplistic view on things, Turk.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's about caring, man.
Yeah.
I think if you care more about your people than you do yourself,
Yeah.
like foundationally, then you want them to replace you. You want to give them training, experience, knowledge, mentorship, guidance, direction, because you care about
Right.
them, their well-being. You're involved in their, as much as they want you to be, their home life. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that they got two kids and they got t-ball at 5 o'clock, and
Yes.
maybe you letting him cut out early, man, is the gift that he's been waiting for all week.
Right.
But that only happens if you care.
And I think I kind of mentioned a little bit in the book. I can't remember for sure, but I talked about the good old boy system, right?
Right.
I think that there's two different good old boy systems. The one was when we used to look out for each other 10, 20, 30 years ago because we cared about one another. And
Right.
we did those things like letting people cut out early to go to a t-ball game, or hey, we're going to go get supper together and the sergeant's going to take care of it, things like that. It kind of morphed into, or either had that second side of it where the good old boy system was strictly looking out like, hey man, I'm gonna make sure you're taken care of so that I'm taken care of later. It wasn't the caring part of it. It was that how do I make myself better, or put myself in a better position.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it I don't even know. I have to think about that. I think that might be two different systems completely.
Yeah.
It's just because that one, I don't know that we would call the good old boy system what we were doing back in the day.
Okay. More camaraderie.
Oh, and just having each other's back.
Yeah.
Just caring. I
Right.
mean, I mean, I had a mandate, like, every day our unit is breaking bread together.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
Whether it's breakfast, whether it's a lunch, whether it's Cuban coffee in the motor barn, we're at some point today,
Mm-hmm.
we are getting together as a group, and we're going to bust balls. We're going to check in with each other. We're going to, who's got what coming up this weekend,
Yeah.
and we're actually going to care what's going on in each other's lives. I don't know that that's going on now, brother.
Certainly not in the bigger departments. And
No.
Icarus was structured where they didn't even want people taking breaks at the same time. Like you could have a fully staffed shift, and if you try to take your lunch break when someone else was taking theirs, you get reamed out from a sergeant. They'd be like,
That's
"Nah, you need to
crazy,
stay away
man.
from the building." They don't want you doing the reports in the building. They want you to do it in your car with your head down in your computer out on the street, so that
Right.
the
Yeah.
civilians can see you.
Right. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
crazy.
you're absolutely right. It's not happening
Right.
like it should be. I think maybe some of the smaller departments still do it, but the medium and bigger size don't.
And can I tell you? So I had a unit of guys, motor unit. We had a 50-man motor unit, and we were in different areas of the county. So
Mm-hmm.
the area that I had was out west, and we had 8 guys.
Okay.
Um, 8 guys would pull their motors up to Bagel Mania, and we would go in and put 2 tables together, and we would have breakfast, or we would go to, uh, another restaurant in the afternoon for lunch.
Yeah.
As a unit, complaint comes in. Fucking eight motors out in front of, like, there's supposed to be like a 2-car rule, like
Sure.
the most you should. The chief is like, "What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm building a team, boss.
Right.
This is what we do." I go, and you can refer the person that complained to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll explain the concept to them.
Yeah.
Or you can, because I can guarantee you'll do it a hell of a lot more diplomatically than I will.
Right.
And guess what? He was good with it.
Yeah.
He's like, that makes sense. I go, you like the work we're doing? You like the productivity? You like how we're gelling? You like how we're out there at all these events and functions? This is the way that happens, and I was fortunate that I had bosses that, you know, would push back against the nonsense.
Well, and in hindsight, had you guys stuck to the policy to a T, right? And you've got those two guys out there, what kind of quality of work do you think you're going to be getting out of the team all around, but especially those two guys who are now on an island by themselves,
Yeah.
who got to look out for each other's backs?
Yeah. I think that, the more we go forward with, development and teams, I think getting back to some just common sense,
Yeah.
ways of approaching, how do you like to be treated? You know what? It's not that much of an ask, man. But I think it goes back to caring. If you don't care, if you've got an agenda and that doesn't fit, it ain't never happening.
Sure. Sure.
And
And
so,
common sense obviously isn't so common, but everyone has some level of it
sure,
that you can strengthen even if you don't have a ton of it, right? And even when it comes to like issues that address departments, I think that common sense goes out the window because everything gets blown out of proportion. Take a breath, calm down, like you said, care, and then make your decision.
yeah, and I think that that's something. Believe it or not, right? Believe it or not, I think when folks like you, are out there, we'll talk about the podcast as well. You, Travis, Tom Rizzo. There's a bunch of
Yeah.
people out in this space talking about how leaders need to be, but how we need to be as a police culture.
Mm-hmm.
How we need to be taking better care of each other, and helping each other uh, deal with the different obstacles and concerns that we all face. And one of them, obviously, is mental health. Um, and you touch on that in the book as well. Um, Talk to me about that in your experience, you know, with that kind of towards the end before you ended up changing departments.
Yeah, so I didn't spend a ton of time on the book. Obviously, it's an issue, and I think that leadership affects that issue, but I am by no means an expert in the field of mental health. I wasn't going to go on and on and give my point of view to that and give the wrong information out. So that's why there was only one chapter dedicated to that.
Gotcha.
When it comes to I get my experiences with it, I wasn't suicidal. I don't know that I would say I was depressed, but I was almost becoming kind of that negative, toxic douchebag, really.
Right.
And it got to the point where, so I live about 25 minutes from that agency where I was at.
Right.
It got to the point where I was mad at work, and then I was mad in the drive home and the drive to. And then it was like when I was getting changed out to get in the squad car because I had a canine to go
Yeah.
to the agency, I'm getting mad. And then it was like I'm looking down at my phone and going, in an hour, I have to get ready. I'm getting mad at that point. I'm getting irritable.
Yeah.
And it was just to the point where everything, even the smallest things, were big issues for me now because of that negativity and that toxicity. And it was just kind of part of that environment there. And that was a big reason why I realized I had to make a change.
Mm.
And I will tell you, going somewhere that takes care of you will change that issue.
Yeah, I bet. And I remember in the book you also made a reference or a distinction between being or becoming burned out
Yeah.
and just plain laziness. Like they're not the same.
Right. Right. Yeah, there are many lazy people in this profession that
Sure.
are just looking to collect a paycheck, right? They're
Right.
they're going to sit in their squad car and hope that no call comes out. They're not looking to be proactive. They're just looking
Right.
to be lazy. That's different. Burnout is when you can't physically do it because you've been burning that candle at both ends in the middle, and
Right.
you're exhausted, you're irritable, you're upset, and you just can't. You just can't. This is the only way to put it, I guess.
Right. I I remember I read, you had in the book kind of towards the end, you talked about how leadership is, plays a role, and not solely to blame for the mental health crisis in the profession, um, but it's certainly a contributing factor.
Yeah, it's not solely to blame, but I would say that it's a big part of it. I can't put a number on it. Is it the
Of course
majority?
not.
Is it the
Right.
minority? But when you've got leadership that only cares about themselves, who's
Right.
only looking out for themselves, they're not going to do proactive things to make sure that your mental health is where it needs to be. We're in
Right.
a career field where we see a bunch of shit, and we should be proactive about our mental health. Leadership who only cares about themselves isn't going to do that, for one.
Right.
Two, when an incident happens and they only care about themselves, they're not going to get you the help you need.
Right.
And when you have that feeling of betrayal from the people who are supposed to be looking out for you, it only compounds whatever you're going through, whether it be PTSD or depression or anxiety or whatever.
Right.
Now that's sitting on your shoulder also, besides the problem that you had.
Right. I so I've been in that position, right? And in this in this second chapter, I've taken actually a little different approach, Turk. Um, Fuck them,
Yeah.
because this is what happens. Think back. If you rely on the chief, your sergeant, your to give a shit about you for your own health,
Mm-hmm.
mental, physical, and emotional health. Ooh, I'm saying right out of the gate, man, reframe it. Don't expect it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, it's almost like, if I don't expect it, I can't ever be disappointed when it doesn't happen.
And I think that's where it's important for guys like you and me and the people that are on the same page to have that mentality and get to the officers early and let them
Yeah.
know that. Because the big problem that we're seeing is you've got agency leaders who are posting the posters all over the PD. Get help, find help, we're here
Right.
for you. And then when it happens, they're not really there for you. And you
No,
have
bro.
that sense of security that then comes crushing down.
That's they pull the rug out from underneath you.
Yes.
Yeah, man. No,
Yes.
that most certainly. And so I think one of the things that's important to let the guys and girls out there know is you don't need to go through your agencies to get help,
Right.
especially if it's an agency that's just doing smoke and mirror bullshit that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
really give a shit. And the way you know is past performance.
Yeah.
Hey, what did they do to John Kelly when he raised his hand and said, "Hey, he needed help"? Oh, they let him go down to Florida. He was in a program for 30 days. He's back. He's fully reinstated. But okay.
Yeah.
Or no, they fucking took his gun, they took his badge, and they put a fucking flyer up with his face on it
Mm-hmm.
saying, call 911 if he comes to the
Yes.
building.
Yes.
Holy smokes. Because I've
And
seen that and you've seen that.
when that email comes out that so and so is no has their access restricted from the building, if they show up, a supervisor needs to be notified. What message does that
Not
send to
because
all of
they're a
the other
criminal.
officers?
Not
Right.
because they're a criminal and they're under
Right.
suspension for fucking stealing or
Right.
doing something nefarious.
Because the person who is saving other people's lives requested and asked for help to have their own life saved, and instead we're gonna fucking kick them out the door.
Dude. Oh, I've seen the flyer, man.
Yeah.
I've seen the flyer and it's so disheartening. So I guess the big piece, right? The big takeaway for the guys and girls listening is, man, know your environment.
Yeah.
Know what time it is.
Yeah.
And because you and I will never say don't get help,
Right.
but there are many avenues to take.
Yes.
Be smart about taking the right avenue to
Yeah.
get the help that you need.
And in most areas, your HR is different than your agency. So if you have to rely on your health insurance and go through EAP to try to find the right resources,
Right.
your PD shouldn't know about it.
Right.
Okay. It should never happen. And if it does, then you're looking at some other issues to
Right.
address.
And quite frankly, in this day and age with technology, I mean, if you go into the Google God
Yeah.
search
Yeah.
and put in help with post traumatic stress, help with marriage, there are organizations, fighting each other to give you free services.
Yep.
You got 22-0, Dan Jarvis. I don't know if you know him or if you've had
Hmm.
great guy. I'll put you in touch with them.
Yeah.
He's a great resource helping first responders and veterans process and deal with trauma. Um, on the cuff. It's just good
And there are
people.
people that are much smarter than me and you that realize now how much anonymity I can't say it obviously, but I know
All
what it
right.
means.
Amen.
They know how important that is. And so
Yeah.
they're starting to offer those services anonymously.
Yeah.
We're seeing it with like the drug and alcohol side of things. Man, you need help, we can find you an anonymous group to get to.
Yeah, no doubt. Um, and I was fortunate, man. I went through my EAP.
Yeah.
Like they, my sergeant. I had two cool sergeants. I was at work. I was showing up to work shit faced,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, "Okay, this ain't gonna happen again.
Yeah.
Um, you can either go get help, or we're gonna command refer you." I'll get help.
Yeah.
I called a woman named Judy Cowles in EAP. She's a sweetheart. She said, "Hold on." Gave me a name for a retired cop that ran AA meetings out of his house.
Yeah.
Boom,
the
done.
the biggest thing you have to realize, and the biggest suggestion that I would give to anyone looking for EAP, is that you have to realize it could be a great experience for you or it could be bad. That doesn't mean that it should be the last experience for you. If you go to EAP and it's not what you're looking for, keep looking.
Yeah,
Keep
man.
trying to find what you need, because there are some out there. I've heard horror stories.
Of
I've also
course.
heard some really great stories though too.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Fortunately, man, there are just tons of options.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's not even you. Maybe it's your brother or sister doing some research for you
Yes.
and going, "Hey, man, you know, got my legal pad, man. Let's sit down. Let's I charted out some things, because we can do that for each other."
Yeah. Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, man, I want to talk about the podcast, bro.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have the book, right? This is a chicken and the egg thing, bro. What came first?
Podcast came first.
Podcast came first.
We're in season 3 right now.
That's awesome, man.
The book came out at the start of season 3. So
Okay.
um it
Now,
yeah,
who's your sidekick, brother? Who's your partner?
so I got 3 of them, right?
Okay.
When we first started, my sidekick was just Swagger. He was my coworker.
Okay.
For season 3, we brought on Erica and Kenyon. Erica is a former cop, now turned certified therapist.
Okay.
And Kenyon is someone I met through social media. He was doing the TikTok thing and he was getting really big. We had him on as a guest, really seemed to mesh pretty well, and we brought him on full time.
Dude, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the podcast. What's give me the concept for our listeners.
Yeah, like so initially when it started off, the whole idea was those two cars kissing up
Yeah.
to one another on overnights. That we called it 25ing. We
Yeah.
10-25 together, and you've got you and your buddy, and you're talking about how the shift's going. You're talking about how your life's going. You're talking about how the week's been. That was the initial concept for us. We wanted to kind of use it as an outlet for mental health.
Okay.
Since then, it's kind of we still focus on mental health. We focus on leadership. We try to take a topic that we'll focus on each episode, or we'll
And
bring in a guest.
when do you release Turk?
We have moved to the 10th and the 25th of each month.
Okay, twice a month.
Yes. Our first year was pretty sporadic. Our second year got a little more stable. Now we're pushing for 2 a month.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And so the format is kind of growing and developing mental health, and now it's morphing into more of a broader categories.
Yeah, it's still it's hard to explain, but it's all law enforcement or first responders for sure.
Yeah.
We will focus on things that can kind of affect your mental health in the long run. What we've like one of our last ones, we talked about Alcoholics Anonymous within law enforcement.
Right.
This last one that we just released, we talked about foster care and adoption as it relates to first responders. Previously, we've had guys like Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman on and talking about his impact on law enforcement. So it's the general theme is law enforcement, but we really try to focus on that mental health and leadership aspect of it.
That's cool, bro. No, it's important because there's a bunch of conversations that need to be happening out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not going to have them organically, a couple of 3 people that are on the job and that have a background can start the conversation.
Yeah.
We can listen to it, and then that kind of can empower us to follow up with each other.
And again, that's how my eyes were opened, right? I wasn't having those conversations with my squad mates until I heard the right podcast that opened my eyes, and I said, we got to do that too.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Plenty of no competition, just collaboration, man. Plenty of room at the table for people trying to give our brothers and sisters a hand out of the hole, or keep them from falling in it.
It is amazing that there are some out there that I think they're more concerned with viewership and how many numbers they can get. But for the most part, the group that we've gotten in with, yeah, it's all about helping one another out.
Yeah, man. It's funny. So I'm not gonna fucking bite on that fucking little snicket of bait that you threw out there. There are some real fucking douchebags. But hey, like in any space, man,
right.
In any space, there's people out there that maybe they're in it for the wrong reason. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I would rather reach out and get turned down and know who that person is and not be on their show, or have them on my show, and have the people that are willing to help out and work on my show or be on their show, or vice versa, because we're getting the right message out there.
That's it, man. It's important. And at the end of the day, something that you say may resonate differently than what you and I may say this basically the same thing, but because somebody's drawn to the way you said it, I don't give a shit, man. Fucking hear what's being said and then take action, right? Yeah. I mean, it's all good. It's all good. Listen, man, I got a big ask, bro. Big ask. And I didn't prep you on the pre thing. Nothing too crazy, man. And if you need to take a second, by all means. What's something, Turk, that guys and girls listen to this podcast, usually going into work and going home.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's something that, you would like to pass on to them, man? Something that you'd like to say to them, especially during these, I'll say, tough times, man, that we're as a profession, our culture seems to be undergoing a transformation.
I think, well, the first thing is you're not by yourself, right? There's more like you out there. Just because it's not being talked about doesn't mean that you're the only one. It's my dog.
Dude, I got 3 and I can't believe I haven't heard from him yet. I'm just like, oh, just shut the fuck up. No, so good. Yours was the one who
do a podcast with a cannon in the background. It works out just fine.
It's awesome.
Yeah, so one, you're not by yourself. I think if you're looking for like advice though, I think my number one thing would be take that breath. Take a deep breath and analyze things before you act. There's going to be a lot of shit in this career field that's going to piss you off internally. Before you open your mouth, before you type that email, before you act, take a breath and analyze it. Consult the people you know that you can trust. There are other officers out there with you that are fucking snakes in the grass. You're going to figure that out soon. Don't go to them with your problems. Go to your true buddies and the true guys that have your back. I think short answer, that's it right there.
Yeah, man. No, I appreciate that. It's somebody once said, don't react, respond.
Yeah.
And that's that pause, man. That's that. All right, man. I'm not gonna fire off something really. I'm gonna be very methodical about how I respond to the situation.
Well, we're taught to do that with people on the street so that we're not getting IAs and shit like that. But then as soon as we get in that 4 squared walls where we feel safe, we're typing out fucking emails, we're sending text messages, and we're getting ourselves in trouble.
Yeah. We're saying like, oh, what did you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. No good, man. Thanks for your time today, brother. I really appreciate it, man. It was great meeting you. I hope to meet you in person someday.
For sure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Turk Gallagher, the book, you can grab it on Amazon. I'll put all that information in the show notes, your podcast information in the show notes. Imposters on the Throne, Warriors in the Shadows, Exposing Poor Leadership Tactics During Tough Times by Turk Gallagher. The podcast is Spinning Our Gears podcast. He's got a great group of people producing that podcast. They're going car to car, man, and we're having the discussions that we should have been having all along. I appreciate your time, brother. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on, man. This was awesome.
My pleasure. And that is that, my man.